There is a specific moment when almost everyone fails. It's not when the task is impossible. It's not when there's a lack of time. It's when you simply don't want to do what needs to be done. You know it's important. You know it will help you in the long run. But something inside you resists. Procrastinate. Looks for distractions. Negotiate with yourself. And the more you try to force yourself, the worse it gets. Most people call this a lack of discipline or laziness. But this explanation is superficial and unfair. Because the problem is not with your willpower. It's in the way the brain reacts to effort, discomfort, and delayed reward. The human brain was designed to avoid unnecessary energy expenditure and seek immediate relief. When a task seems difficult, long, or uncertain, it activates automatic escape mechanisms. That's why, even intelligent and motivated people get stuck in front of important tasks. Study, train, work on something complex, maintain consistency. It's not incapacity. It's misunderstood biology. And while you try to solve this with momentary motivation, the brain continues to win the battle. But there is a little-known point. The brain can be forced to act even when you don't want to. Not by brute force, but through specific adjustments that reduce resistance and activate action. When these right levers are used, doing difficult things stops being a constant internal battle. In this video, you will understand how to force your brain to perform difficult tasks even when you don't feel like it. Not with motivational phrases, but with clear principles of neuroscience and behavior. Methods used by people who build extreme discipline without relying on inspiration. If this type of mental control is something you want to develop, subscribe to the channel now. Here, the focus is on transforming effort into a system and discipline into a trainable skill. Because true power is not doing difficult things when you are motivated. It's being able to act even when you don't feel like it. To understand why doing difficult things feels so burdensome, it is necessary to observe how the brain makes decisions in everyday life. He doesn't choose based on what is best for your future. He chooses based on what reduces discomfort now. Whenever a task involves effort, uncertainty, or a delay in generating a reward, the brain interprets it as something to be avoided. This mechanism is not a character flaw. It's survival. For most of human history, wasting energy was dangerous. The brain learned to conserve whenever possible. The problem is that this ancient system is still active in a world that demands constant discipline, prolonged study, and intense cognitive work. When you look at a difficult task, the brain does not see goals, growth, or the long term. It sees cost, sees fatigue, frustration, risk of failure. And it immediately activates resistance. This resistance appears as laziness, distraction, the urge to procrastinate, or that strange feeling of heaviness even before starting. That's why waiting for motivation almost never works. The will only appears after the action begins, not before. But most people do the opposite. Waits to feel something before acting. And while you wait, you reinforce the habit of avoiding. The more times you avoid difficult tasks, the more your brain learns that avoidance works. It starts to protect you from effort even before you try. The result is a silent cycle of procrastination and frustration. Before talking about extreme discipline, it is necessary to break this cycle. In the next step, we will show what the first practical lever is to reduce this initial resistance and force the brain to take action even without the will. The first real lever to force the brain to do difficult things has nothing to do with motivation or willpower. It starts by reducing the threat that the task represents to the nervous system. The brain resists less when the perceived cost is low. And this cost is not just physical. It's mental. When you think of a difficult task as a single, large block, your brain interprets it as a huge expenditure of energy. It doesn't analyze details. He sees the whole and reacts with flight. That's why important tasks seem so heavy even before starting. The solution is to break the task down strategically. Not in overly logical or organized parts, but in a ridiculously simple first step. Something so small that the brain can't justify resisting it. Not studying the entire subject, but opening the material. Not train for an hour, but put on the shoes. Not writing the project, but opening the document. This first step is not meant to produce results. It serves to deceive the brain's defense system. Once initiated, brain chemistry begins to change. Dopamine stops being associated only with escape and begins to be linked to progress. Small, but real. It is at this point that the will begins to emerge. Not before. The action comes first. The sensation comes later. Those who understand this stop negotiating with their own mind and start structuring their behavior intelligently. Forcing the brain does not mean pushing it violently. It means reducing resistance until the action becomes the easiest path. After you start the task in the simplest way possible, the next challenge quickly appears. Sustain the action when the real difficulty begins. It is at this point that many people get stuck again. Because starting is one thing, Continuing when discomfort appears is something completely different. The brain does not resist only at the beginning. It resists staying in the effort. Whenever the task begins to require concentration, patience, or tolerance for mistakes, the mind tries to escape. Thoughts arise. The urge to stop appears. The feeling of heaviness increases. This is not a sign that you can't do it. It's a sign that the brain is still testing if running away is an option. The way to deal with this is not to increase the pressure, but to reduce the perceived duration of the effort. The brain accepts discomfort when it knows it is temporary. Therefore, one of the most effective strategies is to work with short and well-defined windows. Not deciding to do the entire task. Decide to stay for just a few minutes. When you tell your brain that it only needs to keep going for 5 or 10 minutes, the resistance drops. The effort stops feeling infinite. And, once again, brain chemistry begins to change. Norepinephrine increases, focus improves, and action stabilizes. Often, after this short period, you continue naturally. Not out of heroic discipline, but because the brain has already come out of defense mode. And if you don't continue, that's fine. The important thing is that you trained your brain to stay even without the will. After you learn to initiate and sustain action in short windows, the next level is to transform that behavior into something automatic. The brain hates repeated decisions. Every time you need to decide whether or not to do something difficult, the resistance reappears. That's why real discipline doesn't come from deciding better, but from deciding less. What forces the brain to act even without will is predictability. When a difficult task always happens at the same time or under the same conditions, the brain stops arguing. He understands that it is part of the pattern and reduces the anticipated resistance. The action stops being emotional and becomes mechanical. This is the mistake of those who depend on motivation. Motivation fluctuates. The system doesn't. Disciplined people don't wake up wanting to do difficult things. They just follow a predefined script. The brain, upon realizing that there is no real choice, conserves emotional energy and goes into execution mode. Another important point is to eliminate internal negotiations. Thoughts like, "I'll skip just today," or "I'll make up for it later," seem harmless, but they train the brain to question the process. Each negotiation opens up space for escape. Forcing the brain requires closing those gaps. A simple strategy is to set clear rules. Fixed schedule, defined duration, and specific task. No adjustments along the way. When the brain understands that there will be no debate, resistance drops drastically. If this content makes sense to you, take the opportunity to like the video now. This helps the channel grow and reinforces that this type of direct and scientific approach is worthwhile. At some point in the process, you notice something uncomfortable. Doing difficult things never becomes completely comfortable. And that is a common expectation mistake. Many people believe that discipline means reaching a point where effort no longer hurts. That almost never happens. What changes is not the discomfort, but your relationship with it. The brain tries to avoid any sensation that seems threatening or exhausting. When you repeatedly flee from discomfort, it learns that escaping is the correct strategy. But when you stay, even when you want to stop, something different happens. The brain begins to recalibrate what it considers bearable. This process does not require extreme suffering. It requires controlled exposure. Stay a little longer than you would like. Not to prove something to yourself, but to teach the brain that discomfort is not dangerous. Over time, the threshold of resistance increases. Tasks that once seemed impossible become merely difficult. And difficult tasks become normal. That's how discipline is truly built. Not in bursts of effort, but in small repeated confrontations with discomfort. Each time you stay, the brain registers that escape is not necessary. He starts to cooperate. This is a crucial point. Discipline is not the absence of internal resistance. It is the ability to act despite it. Those who understand this stop waiting to feel like it and start operating at a higher level of control. There are some silent mistakes that make people sabotage their own discipline, even when they already know good methods. One of the most common is waiting to feel motivated to act. This waiting seems logical, but it trains the brain to take control of decisions. Whenever you only act when you want to, you reinforce the idea that discomfort should be avoided at all costs. Another frequent mistake is trying to change everything at once. Taking on extreme routines, setting overly ambitious goals, and making unrealistic demands. At first, this even generates excitement, but it quickly turns into exhaustion. The brain interprets this excess as a threat and reacts with even greater resistance. Discipline is not built with uncontrolled intensity, but with strategic consistency. There is also the myth that disciplined people don't feel like giving up. That's not true. The difference is that they don't negotiate with that will. They feel, recognize, and continue. Those who negotiate too much leave room for constant exceptions. And each exception weakens the system. Another powerful saboteur is confusing rest with escape. Resting is planned. Escape is impulsive. When you use distractions to escape effort, you teach the brain that there is always an easy way out. This makes the next attempt even harder. If any of these mistakes seem familiar to you, take the opportunity to like the video now. This helps this content reach more people who also want to develop real discipline but are still stuck in these invisible patterns. In the next step, we will show why these methods work in practice and how they are used in high mental demand contexts. When you observe people who can consistently do difficult things, you realize they are not more motivated or mentally stronger. They just operate with different rules. In high-demand environments, where mistakes are costly and discipline is not optional, no one relies on willpower. Everything is structured to reduce resistance and increase execution. Neuroscience explains this clearly. Whenever a behavior is repeated under predictable conditions, the brain creates automatic pathways. The less decision involved, the lower the mental energy expenditure. That's why, over time, difficult tasks stop feeling like internal battles and become just part of the process. These people do not argue with their own minds. They trust the system they have built. Defined schedules, clear tasks, well-established boundaries. The brain learns that there is no negotiation and stops wasting energy trying to escape. The effort continues to exist, but the friction decreases. Another important point is identity. When you see yourself as someone who acts despite the resistance, each small action reinforces that internal image. The brain begins to align behavior and identity. Doing difficult things stops being an exception and becomes the norm. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a cumulative effect. Each time you act without will, you strengthen the neural circuit of execution. Every time you flee, you strengthen the evasion circuit. That's why this method works in practice. It doesn't try to change how you feel. He repeatedly changes what you do. Applying all of this in daily life does not require a different personality or an extraordinary willpower. It requires a simple structure and conscious repetition. The first step is to decide in advance which difficult tasks are part of your routine. Don't leave it for the moment. When the decision is already made beforehand, the brain finds less room to resist. Next, you set clear boundaries. When it starts, when it ends, and what exactly will be done. No improvisation. The brain handles fixed rules better than open choices. This reduces anxiety and decreases the urge to escape in the middle of the process. During execution, the focus is not on perfect performance. It's perseverance. To remain even when the urge to stop appears. Each sustained minute reinforces the neural circuit of action. You are not just completing a task. You are training your brain to act despite the resistance. When finishing, conscious closure is as important as the beginning. Stopping at the set time teaches the brain that effort has an end. This reduces future aversion and increases readiness for the next cycle. Over time, something changes profoundly. Doing difficult things stops being an emotional event and becomes an automatic behavior. Resistance still appears, but it loses power. You no longer need to convince yourself. Just execute. This is the true meaning of extreme discipline. It's not rigidity. It's predictability. It's turning effort into routine and difficulty into something normal. In the end, forcing the brain to do difficult things is not about becoming someone relentless or living in constant suffering. It's about taking control. Control over when to act, regardless of how you feel at the moment. When you understand how the brain reacts to effort, reward, and discomfort, discipline ceases to be a personality trait and becomes a trainable skill. Most people spend their lives waiting to feel like acting. And while waiting, they reinforce the habit of avoidance. Whoever learns to act even without the will breaks this cycle. Not because you feel better, but because you understand that action comes before feeling. Every time you act despite the resistance, the brain learns that fleeing is not necessary. Over time, something changes profoundly. Doing difficult things stops being a daily internal struggle. The resistance still appears, but it no longer decides. You don't negotiate. You execute. This creates a silent advantage that accumulates day after day. While many rely on motivation, you rely on a system. If this video helped you see discipline and effort in a different way, subscribe to the channel now. Here, the focus is on deep productivity, accessible neuroscience, and real mental control. No cliches, no empty promises. Remember that. You don't need to want to act. You need to act to want. When you learn to force your brain to do difficult things, even without the will, you stop being a hostage to what you feel and start commanding what you do. And this change, when it happens, transforms not only your productivity but also the way you build your own life.